Welcome back everyone, Michael here with Offshore Citizen. Today I'm going to bring you a response to one of the comments on one of our videos. One of our regular viewers, who I appreciate, had made a comment on a statement that I had made in another video, which was I had mentioned that volatility undermines returns, and they were asking for a video a little bit about this. So today I'm going to share a very little known investment secret. I don't know why it's not so known, but it's something that very, very few people seem to be aware of. And it applies not just to investing, but I think to many other potential areas of life, and therefore, the consequences of how we should make certain decisions. So I'm going to talk about that today. I'll give you kind of the math behind it so you can see that what seems not intuitive is actually true. And yeah, it'll be a fun little experiment. So before we do that, if you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button, nail the notification bell, hit that little all notifications. If you'd like help with investing, asset protection, tax optimization, forming companies, opening bank accounts, getting residencies, getting citizenships, please reach out to me. You can book a call, calendly.com/Michael-Rosmer. There's a link in the description below, or send a message to our websites, offshorecitizen.net or offshorecapitalist.com. Okay, so here is this is sometimes referred to as the difference between average and actual returns, okay? The basic underlying lesson is that heightened volatility actually hurts overall performance, okay? And I mean, you maybe would, this is maybe represented by the tortoise and the hare story, right? The very famous parable, but I think it's for some reason not too apparent for people. So sometimes people have this idea that, hey, if I have really good wins in one case and then, nothing's going on, so at another point, that's fine, that works out the same or better, etc., than getting steady returns. And actually that's mathematically untrue, okay? So I'll talk maybe just about the math first, and you can go through and you can see it, and then we'll discuss how that should play into how you should invest, and just, I think, aspects of life and how, again, we should have decision making, okay? So here's the basics of it. Imagine you have 6 years, okay? 6 years of investment returns. Every year you get 5% a year, okay? So what is your total return at the end of 6 years? Approximately 34%, okay? So 5% times 5% times 5%, etc. Out 6 years, 34% compounded, so slightly higher than 30%, all right? Now, intuitively, what some people would believe is so long as the average of those 6 years is 5% a year, that it would yield the same result as 5% every year, right? So for example, if we had 10% one year, then 0% the next, 10% the next, then 0% the next, 10% the next, and 0% the next. In other words, 3 10-year or 10% a year periods of return, and 3 0% rates of return. So in other words, just flat, right? I mean, you're getting a total of 30%, right? You have 30 divided by 6. It's the same as 30 divided by 6 is equal to 5. So it's the same, right? Turns out it's not. If you compound those numbers out, what you're going to find is that the average, or the actual return you get, is about 33.1%, okay? That doesn't seem like a lot when you're talking about a small amount of over those numbers, right? It's a 1% difference. Okay, on $100,000 invested, that would be, or it's a 0.1%. Yeah, it's about a 1% difference. So, you're like, okay, it's $1,000. Now with $1 million, it's $10,000. But if you start extrapolating that over time, and if you realize that you would often have much more volatility. In that particular case, you're varying by 5% plus or minus from the baseline. In reality, you would often have much more volatility because you'll have drawdowns, right? So this is most easy to see if you just imagine that you have no returns for 5 years, and then in 1 year you have 30%, right? Again, across 6 years, 30 divided by 6 is 5 a year. It's the same, right? But you know that there's no compounding in that case, so you can see very clearly that now it's a 4% difference, right? Let's extrapolate it a little bit further. Let's say, well, you could have had a drawdown of, let's just say, in 1 year you have 100% loss, right? And in one you have 130% gain. And so where do you end up? We actually end up at 0, right? you can see how volatility actually, it doesn't work, it doesn't average. Averages are misleading. And I think a lot of investment advisors give wrong information in this regard. They'll display, hey, here's our average returns, but the averages don't matter. The actuals matter. Like, what was the actual compounded return over time, okay? So this is just, it's an interesting thing because when you tell people, you say, hey, it actually makes a difference whether you have, another example might be you could have plus minus 2, right, from the baseline. So say the average was 5. So instead of 5 a year, you're going to have 7 on half of the years and 3 in the other half. It's going to overall work out to less than the 5. Also keep in mind that over time that this magnifies, right? So, okay, it's, when I did the example of the 3 10s versus the 6 5s, it was about a 1% difference, but that was over 6 years. What about over 12? What about over 18? What over 24, right? So the bottom line is volatility undermines returns. What does this teach you? It teaches you the importance of diversification or asset allocation across non-correlated investments, right? Because they're going to counterbalance each other, right? So you have sort of this sense of rebalancing that kind of levels things off. And it might seem like, hey, I'm missing out because, one thing's going down while another's going up. But actually that smoothing effect in terms of your actual returns, not your average returns, actually boosts your return. There's a number of other reasons why it boosts your return often as well. But so what does this tell you? If you're interested not just in wealth preservation, but also in optimizing what you get at the end, it pays to pick multiple different asset classes that are going to function differently from each other, okay? It pays to not be in one thing. And it's really tempting at some point in time to say, I want all my wealth in crypto or all of it in stocks or all of it in whatever because, hey, stocks outperform bonds on average, right? But it turns out this leveling effect actually has a very real positive impact. In addition to that, I think it's useful from the perspective of societies, right? We could allow ourselves to go into like deep, dark depressions and then, like booms and busts. Boom and bust cycles are bad overall. The net productivity gain, the net result at the end is worse from boom and bust cycles than it is from kind of steady level. Now, obviously, what you can do is you can have something where you artificially constrain this and you create a bunch of other problems. And so that's not what we're advocating here, but that would be something worthwhile as well. You can see it similarly in health, right? There's lots of evidence to suggest that kind of like consistency and routine, et cetera, is a good thing for health. I'm terrible for this. This is probably not a great thing for me. You could probably see it in a variety of different areas. Now, of course, the opposite is probably true as well. Certain experiences heighten each other, right? The experience of the cold and experience of the heat have an effect on each other. And in relationships, we like to have passion and things like this. So not to say that it's something that we should disregard in life, but I think it's really useful to understand from the standpoint of your investing that this is going to have a leveling effect. So what are we going to do? Let's pick some practical steps that we can take. Well, first of all, let's find assets that have predictable returns, or at least fairly consistent returns, not necessarily predictable, but consistent, right? So in this sense, something like real estate that has more steady returns, that has cash flow as a big portion of it, et cetera, that's going to balance this out a little bit, is going to help to compress that volatility, and that volatility is going to have some advantages. Next thing, it's worthwhile to diversify between assets and to rebalance, right? Especially if they're non-correlated assets. So I've talked in some other videos about, alternative investments. And I have talked about how, yes, diversification can be diversification. So you don't want to get, bad assets in the mix in order to try and counterbalance good assets. That's not the idea. The idea is, can you find a few non-correlated strategies that have a similar performance profile, right? And by leveraging those, you can do better. Not only that, you're going to benefit from this psychologically because, hey, it's difficult to sustain a 50% drawdown without panicking and selling. Whereas if things are pretty steady, maybe it's not so exciting, but on the other hand, at least you're like, hey, I'm not losing money, so it might help you with that. What are some other examples? You can lock yourself in on certain gains. There's various different types of financial assets that allow you to kind of like lock in gains, which is useful. It's one of the reasons why in part of my portfolio I day trade it. is to kind of counterbalance the effects of the up and down. If I just hold, then the ups and downs, you know, maybe my actual return might not be that much better, but on a risk-weighted basis, in other words, in terms of the volatility of the up and down of the portfolio, it levels out a bunch more. So anyway, these are some things that you may want to consider. So I hope that helps. If you'd like any, or if you have thoughts on it, put it in the comments below. If you have ideas about, you know, different strategies for kind of creating that diverse, counterbalancing, leveling asset mix, I would love to hear that.